Hello, everyone. Welcome to Growing Together, a gardening podcast with me, John Lamb, and Don Kinsler, a lifelong gardener and the North Dakota State University Extension horticulturist for Cass County. Don, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, and the seeds are starting to arrive. My mail order seeds are starting to arrive from a few different companies. And so, so I'm already feeling a good pressure.
Good.
A good pressure to kind of, let's get spring started.
Just out of curiosity, what are the seeds that have come in?
Well, the begonia seeds were delayed a little bit. And so, I'll coax them along. Onion seeds, which we're going to talk about onions today in the podcast. But the onion seeds I'm going to be seeding probably maybe even this evening.
Oh, really?
And and the petunia seeds I've got, but that'll be March 1st.
Okay.
The tomato seeds, that'll be April 1st. So each of these different seed types, I've got kind of a calendar as to when you start each of these, because some you don't want to start too early. Otherwise, they get just too big. So, so I've got my seeds coming, and then I'm planning my calendar out. And so, you can sure feel spring coming, especially when my seeds are arriving.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to talking about onions. But before we get to that, you've got a question from a listener.
Yes, Brenda sent a photo of her Dieffenbachia. She refers to it as dumb cane. And the reason why Dieffenbachia is called dumb cane, as one of the common names, is because if you chew on the stems of that, stems or leaves, it can cause a paralysis of the tongue. Oh. And so it can affect one's speech. And so I don't know if someone at some point tried to eat a Dieffenbachia and it caused paralysis of the tongue. So dumb cane is a common name. So anyway, Brenda writes and said, my dumb cane is declining. She detected fungus gnats on it and said that she dusted the top of the soil with mustard powder and also used sticky yellow traps. And she indicates that none were caught when she tried apple cider vinegar. She says, I'm going to follow up with Don's additional advice. She must have seen some advice on cutting back plants. She says she's going to follow up with Don's additional advice of cutting off the top of the plant and repotting the plant in the future. Signed, Brenda. And so, fascinating. And thanks, Brenda, for sending in a photo. We see a couple of the Dieffenbachias, and they're quite tall. The best growth is up on the top. Nice leaves. Dieffenbachia has a variegated yellow and green leaf, and but I see in the plants the bottom is quite sparse, but there is a little bit of new growth towards the base. So what I would do with this plant is cut it all the way back to about 6 inches above ground level. Right now, I'm estimating that plant could be about 2.5 feet tall, maybe. And so I'm suggesting, and what I would do if this plant were mine, would be to cut it back to 6 inches above soil level and coax that new growth from the base. And also, since Brenda, you mentioned fungus gnat problem, and of course they can create eggs in the soil, I would remove the plant from its current pot, shake off the existing soil, dispose of that, and repot it into a brand new potting mix and continue your treatment for fungus gnats. But I feel that the plant just needs a rejuvenation, and Dieffenbachia respond quite well to being cut way back, and new growth will start coming from the base. And so I've done that with a number of our Dieffenbachias over the year, and it works quite well. It doesn't necessarily need a bigger pot, maybe slightly bigger than the one you've got it in, but I would do that, a severe cutback and repotting into fresh soil. And I think your Dieffenbachia will sprout and come through just fine.
She mentioned a couple of things there as far as treating fungus gnats. One of them is mustard powder. Mustard powder.
That caught your ear also.
Yeah. Is that?
As it did mine.
Is that something that you've come across before?
No.
Or? Okay.
Count the day lost. You don't learn something new. This is a potential new learning experience. I'm going to check to see if has mustard powder got a reliable control, shown reliable control for fungus gnats. I've never heard of using mustard powder for that. You know, mustard powder has a bit of a tang, And so maybe there is something. I've heard of cinnamon having some reliable effect on some insects. And so that'll be interesting. I'll have to do a little checking.
And the other one there that I've heard of, but the cider vinegar as a trap. Kind of explain how that works.
Apple cider vinegar in shallow saucers can attract some of these. The fungus gnats are kind of like a fruit fly that buzz around bananas that are too ripe or things like that. So it is attracted to fruit. And so apple cider vinegar, maybe with a couple of drops of dishwashing soap in, is oftentimes used as a trap. But apparently that did not trap. The sticky yellow traps are sold at garden centers and online for catching those little black fungus gnats. So again, I don't think the plant is totally going downhill because of the fungus gnats. They're probably, obviously around also. But I think the plant just needs fresh soil and a good hard cutting back. It can take a bit of faith to take a 2.5 foot tall Dieffenbachia and cut it down to what Kinsler says at 6 inches. But again, if this were my plant, that's what I would do. Sometimes you need to cure, make it look good again, or not suffer along with a plant that doesn't look so good. And in 99% of the cases with a Dieffenbachia, you can cut it back and it'll sprout forth from the base really nice again.
All right. Well, that's great information. And if people have questions for you about something like that, a plant that's not doing well or anything else, what's the best way to reach you?
Send me an email, donald.kinsler, KINZLER, @ndsu.edu.
Well, Don, I know I'm not going to write in this letter necessarily, but the topic of conversation today is a question that I do have for you, is how do you grow big onions? We have not, I think I'm going to try growing onions this year. So let's talk me through a little bit about this, about like how we should, for those of us who are new, how we should grow good onions.
I saw a statistic recently that on average, U.S. people eat 20 pounds of onions a year.
I believe that.
A 20-pound bag of onions, that's quite a few onions.
Yeah.
But I bet we do. I do. We do a lot of cooking with onions. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine our fried potatoes without diced up onions in them. And what would a hot dish be without onions?
Right.
And so I think it's fascinating. And this was a staple in our own garden as we were growing up. We had to have enough onions that would store through the wintertime. Otherwise, that'd be a hard time if we didn't have any onions to put in the hot dish.
So you're talking about when you're growing up, this is a couple of decades ago. We talk about this now that there's more and more variety of things. What kind of onions were you growing then?
Well, it's interesting. When we get into the types of onions, my mom always planted onion sets. Those are the little dry kind of bulblets that you can buy. And we also had decent onions, but you asked too about growing big onions. And of course, why grow little onions when you can grow some nice big onions? So we always had decent sized onions. But the fascinating thing is, as we all say, count the day lost, you don't learn something new. A number of years ago, and we'll talk about this in a minute, a few years ago, I learned the trick of growing bigger onions. And it wasn't what my mom, wonderful gardener, it wasn't what she was doing. So I learned something new. But, when I think back to the vegetable gardens we had, we always planted out the onion sets, the dry sets, and we always had plenty of onions to eat. But what I learned recently, we could have had much greater, bigger, more onions. And maybe we could have planted less onions and had bigger bulbs. And so onions, we always just enjoyed growing. And of course, we had a root cellar when I was growing up, so we were able to store them very nicely. And my mom also grew, she planted seed for onions for using fresh, just kind of little green onions.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how about you guys? Did your folks have a garden in which they grew onions?
Not onions. We did a couple of flowers, but didn't grow onions. And I think onions are something that I grew to appreciate as I grew up later, maybe in life, after being a teenager. But now I love them. I really love them. And really love, and I understand that there's a variety of really sweet onions. And so there's just so many.
And again, I know you can buy a bag of onions at the grocery store, but there's something about growing your own onions. And also, you can grow types that store better, are sweeter and bigger. And it's just fun to grow your own onions. And so for anyone that enjoys vegetable gardening, some of the tips that are fun to go through on onions, you get bigger onions, better onions. And so let's start by maybe talking about, okay, what type of onion, what varieties, what cultivars of onions. And now NDSU does trials of the different types of vegetables. And one of the things that they've done trials on is the different onion cultivars. So when you're looking through a seed catalog or the seed rack, it's very important that you choose wisely on the cultivar. When you look at seed catalogs, you'll notice that the onions are divided into two categories: long day and short day types. Okay, and if you think of our growing season in June and early July, long days. Mm-hmm. We have long days, wonderful growing season. So that's the way that I remember for our area, we need to choose long day onions. The short day onions are grown in the South during winter short days.
Okay.
So again, very important for our area, since we have long days in June and July, choose long day types. Okay. So then when we look at the actual names, what I look for in the seed catalog, I want onions that are going to store well. Okay. And if in the description of that onion, if it says stores well, then that's one of its selling points. If it doesn't say that, it's probably not one of the key things. The seed catalogs love to describe the key points. None of them are going to say this variety does not store well. They're not going to say that. But if it says stores well, okay, you can rely on that. So one of the varieties that I like is Patterson. Stores very, very well. From Prairie Road Organic Seeds, which is a North Dakota seed company, Prairie Road Organic Seed, they have one called Dakota Tears. A good name, Tears. And that one stores very, very well too. And so I look for an onion that is going to have good size and stores well. Well, what if you want just a really huge onion, the onion that has proved to grow the biggest in North Dakota is one called Ailsa Craig. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but Ailsa is Ailsa Craig, Craig. So you can find Ailsa Craig in seed catalogs, and they grow huge. They will grow 2 to 6 pounds. That is a big onion.
Yeah.
Great, big, huge onion. And a little bit later in the podcast here, we'll describe kind of the techniques for getting it to grow that big. But if you want a big onion, you've got to start with a cultivar that's capable of getting that big. Now, Ailsa Craig is not a good keeper onion. It won't store into March and April. Dig in the fall, store in March to April, like some of the other varieties. So it's best for eating kind of fresh, and it'll store into the early part of the winter, but won't keep all winter long. But that's okay. You got these great big huge onions, so you got plenty to eat and share. And so other varieties that do well, sweet Spanish, sweet sandwich is another one that does well. Walla Walla onion has shown that it'll do quite well in our area. And again, I mentioned the Patterson, that is one of my own favorites, and Dakota Tears. So once you've determined the type, the cultivar of onion that you want to grow, and of course, these were all long day types, which is very, very important. The next decision is what what form do you want to plant them in? What do you start with? Okay, there's 3 options. Seeds, you could direct seed directly out into the garden, just plant the seeds, but onions take a long time to develop a bulb. So if you plant seeds directly out into the garden, you'll get the green onions, is about all they'll amount to. But my mom used to plant seeds directly, and then we'd just use those as little onions. Okay. The next way that you can plant onions is, I mentioned, my mom always used onion sets. Those are the dry sets. So you can order those from garden centers or a mail order or from garden centers. And those are the little dry bulblets. And that was the way my mom always did it. I suppose they were available. And so they can produce a decent onion. It's interesting, though. Research has shown that the larger the dry set, the less onion you get. Now, I thought the opposite. I always thought when you had your little assortment of onion sets that, this one that's a little bigger, that's going to give me an even bigger onion. But it's shown that for those that are over about a half an inch in diameter, they actually are too far along.
Okay.
They're a little too mature, and so they actually don't end up giving as much as those that are smaller. Okay. So onion sets is what I grew up with. But I mentioned I learned maybe about 6 years ago, a West Fargo gardener emailed me and said, "Hey, you want to come look at my garden? I've got a few things that I'm kind of proud of." And so I went to visit his garden, and it was absolutely awesome, his garden. He was doing some techniques. For example, he was growing string beans up on fences.
Okay.
Pole beans, the string bean version of pole beans. Mm-hmm. And he showed me, and I thought, wow, I don't have to crawl along on my hands and knees anymore to pick these string beans. And so I've started doing that. The other thing that he was growing were these huge onions. And so I asked him, how are you getting the onions that huge? And he said, well, the trick is, and these were some good storage types, he said the trick is to start with onion plants. Okay. And not the dry little bulb sets. And so, okay, good. I'm going to start doing that. And so he showed me his technique. He would buy the onion seeds and then plant those seeds indoors. He had kind of just a room that he had grow lights in, and he would start those onion seeds in a tray in February. And they would germinate and grow February, March, April. Then about the end of April or 1st of May, these plants that formed, he would separate all those out and plant those out in his row. So he started his own plants from seeds. And that I've been doing that ever since. And now I have onions that I'm really proud of, too, thanks to him. And so a person can also buy onion plants at garden centers. So you don't necessarily need to start your own plants from seed. Mail order companies sell onion plants. You'll see that under the onions. You can buy seed, you can buy the dry sets, or you can buy onion plants. So what you get is when you order mail order, you get a clump of kind of dryish onion plants, but they're good, they're fine. They'll oftentimes have a big rubber band around them, and then you just plant those out. And garden centers oftentimes have those onion plants as well for you. Sometimes they might be just kind of in a clump out of soil, or sometimes you'll see them in a little tray, the onion plants. And so if you want really big onions, plants are the way to go. Onion seedlings or plants is really the way to go. And maybe after break, let's kind of talk about starting your own plants and the planting dates and things like that, of how to get going on the onions once you've decided what type you want to plant.
Sounds good.
Get 6 months of local news for just $2. You get unlimited access to the news and information you need to stay connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to get 6 months of local news for just $2.
Right, you were talking about before we went to break about how you can get started on growing onions before you even get outside. What are the dates that we should be looking at?
Okay, so if you decided, okay, I'm going to use the dry sets for planting, or I'm going to use plants. So if you are going to go with the plants and you decide to start your own from seed, again, I mentioned starting in February here, and you don't need to plant them in little individual cell packs like you would other types of plants, but you can just start them in a tray. I got some recycled little plastic bins that are maybe 4 inches or so deep, and just fill it with a potting mix or seeding type mix, and then sprinkle the seed on that mix, cover it with a little more mix, water it. I grow them under lights, and pretty soon they'll start germinating, growing, and you've got a little onion plant going. And when the onion plants, as they're growing, when they get about 5 inches tall or so, the trick is with the scissors to cut them back to like 2 or 3 inches, 2 or 3 inches above soil level. And so as they grow, you keep kind of cutting them back like that. And then by April or so, you've got a really nice onion plant. So now onions, whether you've decided to start from sets, or you start your own onion plants from seed, or you go to the garden center and buy onion plants, onions can take cool weather. So they're one of the plants that we can plant out in April.
Okay.
You know, I put in most of our garden in May, so I wait until May. But a person could plant them out sometime in April, towards the end of April probably. They don't mind chilly soil. They can take some frost, so late frost isn't going to bother them. So if you want some earlier onions, can get going in April, last half of April sometime. And so onions will grow best if they get plenty of good sunlight. So they're not really a shade type vegetable. So plenty of good sunlight. All day sun would be preferred, or at least half a day. And also onions don't want heavy, mucky clay soil.
Okay.
So anything a person can do, add organic matter to make the soil a little lighter. It seems anything that forms a bulb doesn't really want to be in too heavy clay soil. So adding a bit of organic matter is great. And then the spacing is important also on onions. For example, we mentioned the Ailsa Craig, the great big onions, and also my West Fargo friend. For spacing, the spacing on his was important too. He would space them. If he was going to get an onion that was about 5 inches diameter, he'd want to space them about 5 inches apart. And Ailsa Craig that can get the 2 to 6 pound each, that recommended on that variety is probably about 6 inches apart. So if you space some of these larger type onions too close, they're going to get all flat-sided as they try to squish against one another. So you'll have kind of an odd-looking onion, all flat on one side. So check to see the type of onion that you're getting. What is the average diameter size of bulb? And then space your plants or sets that far apart. So use that as your spacing guide. And also, since onions like it well drained, even mound the row up just a little slightly. Sometimes it doesn't take much of a little mound to shed some extra water. So especially in the heavy clay soil, when you create your row in which you're going to plant these plants, maybe just mound it up slightly, mound that row up a little bit, and then plant your onion plants or set into the top of that slightly raised area so that it's going to shed water. So if we got heavy rains, it'll kind of go in between the rows. And the spacing apart on the rows, we usually plant about 3 rows of onions. So you space it the appropriate amount within the row, each bulb or plant within that. And then the space between the rows, I like to be able to get my wheel hoe. That's kind of a wheel old-fashioned rototiller thing that I push down through. It's got a wheel and then kind of a weeding cultivator thing behind it. So I make sure I space it apart so I can get that through. And so you can kind of space them as far apart as you think you need to get your area through. If you don't need to get a little tiller through, or if you're going to mulch them, you could space them as close as maybe a foot apart or so. And so the spacing is really quite important on those as well. And
one question I had, I guess I should have asked this when we were talking about varieties. What are the different tastes of red onion? So if we go to a supermarket, right, you see red onion, white onion, yellow onion. What, and you say you grow, was it Patterson's?
Yeah, Patterson is one of the varieties that we really like.
So is Patterson a white, red, yellow? And what's the flavor like there?
Yeah, that is a yellow
Okay.
onion. And the flavor it's got a good, intense onion flavor.
Okay.
So it's not really the mild, sweet type onion. The mildest, sweetest type onions, many of those aren't the varieties maybe that are best adapted to our long day conditions.
I think a Vidalia is kind of a sweeter onion,
Sure,
right?
yeah, exactly.
I think the Walla Wallas are supposed to be kind of sweet.
They're a little sweet, and that is one we can grow in our area here. And, it would be interesting sometime to do a taste test. If a person had all these different types of onions, it'd be kind of interesting. Do you, for cooking, have one of the different colors of onions that you prefer?
I think I read someplace, I was reading in a recipe I always used to use yellow because I like that kind of the sweeter taste. That's what I associate with them. And then, but I started seeing red more and more. And they were saying that reds are also kind of sweet too, and I've noticed that now too. Generally, if I'm doing something, like if I'm going to caramelize an onion, I will do a yellow. If I'm going to do it with ground beef or something like that, I will use a red. I'm not sure really if there's any real reason, but I tend to go more towards the yellow because I like that sweetness. I love caramelized onions. If I can do something with that.
Oh yeah, that's good eating. We might have to do an onion taste test.
Yes. I want to try here's what I want to do. I want to figure out what onion I want to grow this year. I'm going to grow it. I'm going to make an onion jam.
Really?
I've heard onion jam. I've had onion jam. I really like it. Put it on a little cracker. It's a nice little treat.
Interesting. Does it taste like onions?
It tastes like onions and it tastes like jam. Yeah. No, it does. It does. It really does. It does taste like that. It's not the sharp, I think, because you lose by cooking it for a while, you lose that kind of
I can visualize that, the taste of it.
Yeah. Well, here, let's take another quick break. When we come back, let's talk more about kind of maintaining after you get your plants, your onions planted. How are we going to maintain them to make sure that we can get to the finish line where we can harvest them and we can make some delicious things with our onions?
If you're loving this podcast, be sure to check out our full lineup. From news and local politics to sports and true crime, find your next great listen right now at inforum.com/podcasts. That's inforum.com/podcasts.
All right, we're back this week, and we're talking about planting onions. You were talking earlier about your wheel. What was the contraption called?
Wheel hoe. I think they're usually called.
That's one of the things that you want to use to kind of keep weeds under control. How else do you keep weeds under control when it comes to onions?
Down on my hands and knees and picking them out.
I was afraid that was going to be the yes.
Yes. Onions are not.
There's no way around that is the best form of weed control.
Exactly. But for me, it's like eating popcorn. It's kind of once you get started, it's kind of hard to stop. And onions are not a good competitor with weeds because they have, the tops of onions are kind of up there and the base is kind of just out in the open a little bit. Other types of vegetables, once they develop a leafy canopy, they tend to kind of overshadow or shade out some weeds. But onions, the bare ground there right below the upright leaves, is just open for weeds to germinate well. And so, but on the upside, it's easy to see the weeds. And so I just scurry along with my little weeding. I bought we've talked about this past, some new little gardening weeding tools.
Mm-hmm.
I discontinued the table knife I used to use in favor of a little more efficient type weeding knives. And so I just go along and go down the row with my bucket. One of the reason I mentioned my bucket, one of the worst weeds that I have in my garden is purslane.
Yeah.
Now, I know they're edible. I know they're delicious with ranch dressing, but they're also they're just so spreading so I go along with my bucket because purslane, if you just pick it and leave it lay, it will root. And I've even tried turning purslane upside down with the roots in the air, and they find a way to right themselves and reroot. And so I carry my little bucket along and stick the purslane or other weeds in that. And it's surprising. It's so rewarding when you look down that row of onions that was weedy, and all of a sudden it's nice and clean, and all you see are the onions. And so it is fascinating. That also brings up to mind, too, that the bigger the onion is, thinking about looking at our row of onions, the more leaves that an onion has and that you can encourage, the bigger that onion will be, because each of the leaves on an onion creates one of the scales. As you cut open an onion, it's made of all these layers. Mm-hmm. And so the more leaves you can get an onion plant to produce, the more layers that onion will have, and the more layers, the bigger the onion. So this is all about getting these plants to grow efficiently to produce more leaves and to produce a bigger onion. So one of those ways, of course, is to prevent weed competition. And since onions don't compete very well, and they've got very shallow roots, onion roots don't really amount to a whole lot. They're easy just to pop out of the ground. They don't really have a root system that can anchor them in or that goes very far. So that's one reason why weeding is so important, to keep the weeds from diminishing the growth of that. And watering. I mentioned onions are so shallow rooted, so they can't really pump water out of the lower part very well. So that means they're going to need a fairly constant source of irrigation. They don't want to be muddy wet. No, they want to dry out a little bit in between. But since they don't have that big a root system, giving them adequate moisture during the growing season, that will help produce more leaves, more layers, bigger onion. And so important to water it as needed. And fertilizer to produce those big, nice onions and more leaves, giving it good nutrition. So it's important. It could be a water-soluble type, or it could be a granular. 10-10-10 is a good all-purpose, well-balanced fertilizer. And when you buy a bag of 10-10-10 at the garden center, the bag will indicate how much to put on for a row. Now, you could put it on the planting area, sprinkle it on according to label directions, and then work it into the soil and then plant the onions. Or you can plant the onions and then do what is called side dress. Go along kind of the outer edge on both sides of the row and sprinkle the granular fertilizer, making sure you don't come directly in contact with the plants because that could burn the plants. But to spread and then water in the fertilizer so that it'll become liquefied and available to the roots would be very important. So fertilizing is really, really important. Probably a couple of times during the growing season would be good. A couple of applications would be good. Also, the fertilizer called ammonium sulfate is a good one. I've become a good fan of ammonium sulfate for flowers and vegetables. Ammonium sulfate is another good option to kind of study and look at, too, for your vegetables.
How about, how do you know when it's time to pick an onion?
Well, of course, we rob a few during the growing season, even though they haven't reached their potential. We rob a few to put with hamburgers and things like that. And so that's fine. But yeah, how do you know when it's time for the fall harvest? Now, some recommendations indicate that when about half of the onion plants have toppled over.
Oh,
See,
okay.
when they start getting to their full size, the point at which the leaves meet the bulbs starts to weaken, and that causes the top to drop over. And at a certain point, those leaves become dry and are no longer feeding the bulb. It's not going to increase in size any longer. So, but I've seen other research that indicates that as long as those leaves are green, there might still be some food going down into the bulb. So you could start probably harvesting when about half the leaves have fallen over. But I like to harvest our own when the leaves have totally dropped over and started to go from green to yellow to brown. I leave ours in the ground until the very end, until the tops have dried down. But I also time it before we get some fall rains. So that they aren't sitting in wet soil when they've started to dry down. So even though a person could harvest onions early, I leave them in kind of until the tops are fairly dried down.
And you say they do take a fair amount of time to grow. Like what do you think? 100 plus days?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so for me, the onion harvest is happening in late September or early October.
Okay. So really
again, some might opt to harvest them earlier.
Yep.
Then when you do harvest them, curing them is important. Curing allows any green parts that were up in the leaves to totally dry down so that the tops, the old leaves and everything will become paper dry. And so curing the onions could take place in the garage. Many people put them on screens or shallow trays so that they're just a single layer, so they'll dry down really good. And then to store, storage temperature should be in the upper 30s.
Okay.
Upper 30s, low 40 would be the target. Excuse me, the target temperature for onion storage, and they need dry storage. Dry storage meaning our root cellar is good, plenty of good air circulation. Refrigerators can work. Sometimes that's a little bit of a moist atmosphere too. So dry storage meaning not in plastic bags. The reason why in the grocery store they're sold in mesh bags is because you want that good air circulation around. Now, in a grocery store, they aren't going to store them for too long on that sale spot, so they're oftentimes at room temperature in a grocery store. But for home winter storage, you want colder than that, upper 30s. So when you're getting your onions ready to go into storage, you can just rub off what comes off very loosely. The outer wrapper skins get paper dry, and some of it starts just sloughing off naturally. But we don't want to peel them off much. We don't want to wash them. Just rub off some of the dirt. And if you harvest at just the right point, they'll come out without much dirt on them. And so some people will braid onions, the top dry part, they'll kind of braid them together and hang them up. That'd be kind of neat. I've always wanted to try that. But we store ours just in flat cardboard trays is how we store them. And again, just take off the bare minimum of the wrappers that it's just kind of falling away that you can take off. And also the dry tops, fine to leave on as much or just kind of rub away what kind of just rubs away dry with your fingers.
And so as a reference point, when we're talking right now, it's February 20th. How many onions do you still have left from last summer?
We have probably a third left.
So they will really, they should store all the way through winter.
Yep, storing all the way through winter. And what we do is we keep an eye really close this time of year. If any of them start sending up a little green shoot, meaning they're ending their storage life and they want to start growing, then we will dice them up and put them in the freezer.
Okay.
So very little, if any, waste because they freeze just beautifully. Yep. And so then those are the onions out of the freezer that we'll use this spring and summer on our burgers and everything. And then we won't have to rob the onion patch too early. And then we'll, look for next fall harvest again. So, it's interesting when you talk about onions. Have you ever heard of walking onions?
Yes.
Yeah.
We've grown those. Yes.
You have.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So now we tell you.
Do you have some now? I don't have any.
Yeah, I think we do because I think that they overwinter. I think
they do. Exactly.
Yeah. I did not know this, but we were talking earlier that the green onions that you get in the store are basically the onions. If they were left to grow, they would become full size onions.
Exactly.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So that's kind of neat. Yeah. And of course, you can certainly use your own younger onions for green onions.
Yeah.
But of course, I'm kind of greedy and I want them to go full size.
Yeah.
So now tell me about the walking onion is also called the Egyptian onion. We had those when I was a kid, but I wish that I would have brought those from my parents' house. The reason they're called walking onions is they do winter over, but they produce these little bulblets up on top of the onion, and then when that falls over, it'll start a new one. So it kind of walks around your garden.
Yeah, it'll spread.
Yeah, so
they're not super invasive, but
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's kind of a fun thing, and it's a low maintenance. It
is, and they have good onion flavor. You can chop them up and use the leaves or the little bulblets that form. You can use those, and so kind of fascinating.
One more question I had for you is, do you know if onions work as a pest deterrent? If I could plant a row of onions, would that keep rabbits? And like if I planted those outside my vegetable garden, would that keep, or by other plants? Maybe would that keep them away from other plants?
No.
Okay. There we go. Sad but true.
They certainly wouldn't do any harm to try.
Right.
But, it's interesting. And of course, that whole onion family, the allium, the heavy fragrance, that's been looked at to see if that will keep pests out. And there's kind of anecdotal evidence that maybe it will keep some insect pests out of other types of things, but it's not reliably it's not reliable enough to say, well, if you plant onions next to your cabbage, you won't have cabbage worms. Or if you plant onions next to your potato plants, you won't have potato beetles. And so if anyone has had success with that, absolutely keep doing it. But it hasn't been reliable enough to say, here's the answer to your rabbits or any of your insects. But again, if it's working for somebody in your location, definitely keep doing it.
Well, Don, this has been really, really good information.
Yes, I love
here.
Onions.
And for somebody who's looking forward to growing their first onions, or planting onions. Like I said, we do have the walking onions. I'm looking to maybe pick up a seed catalog now and find one that I think would be good for us.
And John, what I just get the biggest kick out of, I had grown onions for a long time, since I was a little boy with my parents and the onion sets. And what I get a big kick out of is, like I described, it was maybe just 6 years ago that I learned that, wow, onion plants are the way to go. Yeah. So it is so fascinating how in this whole gardening thing, we can just learn new things, and that totally set my onion world on fire. And so I just love it. Yeah, gosh, we can all keep learning from each other.
Well, if people have questions for you, whether they be about onions or anything else they want to plant in their garden or things that are growing in their yard, what's the best way to reach you?
Send me an email, donald.kinsler, KINZLER @ndsu.edu.
Well, Don, thanks a lot for coming in this week.
Thank you, John. Thanks, everyone, for listening.